and rucked up the sleeve of her dress to reveal a tattoo on her forearm. A stark, white, equilateral triangle, and within that, a talaria. The winged sandal of Hermes. The brightness of the white ink against her black skin was itself evidence of the mark's diabolic nature. But the group she was part of, the young Talarians, hadn't gotten as far as they had by cutting corners when it came to security. The man with the gun used his teeth to pull the cork out of a phial and dribbled an oily fluid upon her tattoo. It fizzed and popped and sizzled away into silver smoke, at which point he curtly nodded once. Edith, like most diabolists, was also a member of an international organization known as the Société des Éclairés. While the Société had long ago denounced the Nazis, their sympathizers, and their ideology, due to its worldwide nature, it could not be aggressively political without causing internal problems. The young Talarians, the group to which Edith belonged, were technically independent, but not forbidden from using the Société's resources. It was impossible to say how much the young Talarians had done for the Allies over the course of the war. Their help had been as invisible as it was invaluable. The Nazis, of course, had their own diabolists. Edith had been a founding member of the young Talarians, along with a few of her closest friends. Maja Znidarčić, Zelda Lisman, and Saul Zeitz. She could not sit idly by, not being who she was. Edith had been a small child when the Blackwoods adopted her, taking her from her West African homeland after her parents had died to travel the world with them and their daughter Nancy. But Edith had never forgotten her roots.
"Welcome to London, Edith," said George, lowering his Webley and holstering it. "You're right on time."
"Is my car waiting for me?" she asked, readjusting her sleeve. She wasn't late, but she'd need to get moving if she wanted to arrive in Hawkshead by the afternoon, given the distance and uncertain state of the roads.
"At the garage on St. Mark's,"
he said, and then with a complete shift in his manners, he grinned.
"Good luck to the young hopefuls, too."
Edith cocked a manicured eyebrow at George. "Young hopefuls?" she asked, conveying with her tone that it was an improper thing for him to have said. "To whom are you referring?"
George straightened up. "Sorry, it's only that Monsieur Durand had mentioned Jane and Miriam were to undergo their test."
Of course it had been Patrice Durand who had blabbed. Edith frowned at George as Mercurialis quietly chuckled to itself over her consternation. When an apprentice diabolist underwent their test, it was supposed to be a private affair. Patrice Durand and his former lover, Edith's sister Nancy Blackwood, were estranged, yes, but he knew that Nancy had always been a stickler for the rules. "What else did Patrice have to say about my niece, my sister and her ward?" asked Edith, her tone icier than the streets beyond the windows of the kitchen.
"Nothing,"
said George, blushing now. All his earlier cool had left him. Edith sighed. New recruits were always a bit jumpy. "Let's forget we had this conversation," she said. This new evidence that Patrice had not changed, in spite of his claims to the contrary, cast quite a shadow over another reason for Edith's visit. Edith had finally resolved to at last tell Jane who her father was, even though this was explicitly against her mother's wishes. Jane had always longed to know, and as she had just turned 16 a month ago, Edith had thought to give this knowledge to her as a belated birthday gift. Now she was even less certain this was a good idea. "If you'll excuse me, I'll just use the ladies before I depart," said Edith. George nodded, and Edith swished by him, her heels clicking on the tile. In the washroom, she opened up her makeup bag and applied a light dusting of powder to her cheeks and some mascara to her dark lashes. Both cosmetics were specially formulated with diabolic essences to conceal her appearance. Glamour indeed. Now anyone who looked at Edith would see a white woman, unless they took a careful